Hello again, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Six Pack NFL Preview Podcast Series. I'm your host, as always, Travis, and of course, I'm joined by our expert, our rankings guru, our sensei, Noah Spurlock. Noah, what's going on?
I'm excited to talk about the 49ers. They're an interesting team.
Yeah, poor Jimmy G. He's so handsome, but he has played so few games, which makes his whole situation a little confusing. But before we get into his whole spiel, it's time for plugs. As always, I'm at The Real Travioli on Twitter. Noah is at
Noah, Spurlocknfl.
Yeah, you guys should know that by now. Like, come on. Even I know it by now. And it took me like 6 weeks to finally commit it to memory. But yeah, go follow us. Go check us out. You can, we'll be pushing out our content, shamelessly plugging our other podcasts that we have on here. But if you guys have questions or whatever, need draft advice, we are here to help you. So go hit us up. Also, go subscribe and give us some likes on the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel. That's where you will be listening to this episode, and you can find all our old episodes, and you'll find all our new episodes, all in one place. Isn't that convenient? So go subscribe and get in on the ground floor. But that's enough of me convincing you to go interact with me on social media. It is time to talk about the San Francisco 49ers and their, devilishly handsome franchise quarterback. Jimmy Garopollo, unfortunately, only played in 3 games last year before he suffered a season-ending injury. But in those 3 games, he put up 718 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. That's pretty good numbers. Seemed pretty at home in Kyle Shanahan's system last year. So Noah, what are we doing with Jimmy? Are we buying in and hoping for that breakout if we're just looking for last year, or are we worried about residual effects of the injury?
Yeah, it's really tough to judge Garoppolo this year, but I think he's fine as a backup because in the limited action that we saw, he has looked pretty good. In that 5-game stretch, I think that was 2017. He was really good, but he did, I think, tear his ACL, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, that's tough to come back from. We had mentioned it a couple episodes back with division rival Cooper Kupp, that those are no joke to come back from. So I think he's best left in a backup role.
Speaking from fantasy experience last year, I had Jimmy G starting over Patrick Mahomes for, I think, the first 2 games of last season. So I would say he's more of a backup, but, Patrick Mahomes will make anybody seem like crap when you're comparing them to each other. The one good thing I will say about Jimmy's injury is that it happened so early in the season, so he's had a lot longer to rehab it than someone like Cooper Kupp, who got hurt mid-season. He has the potential to be great. Like you said, when he was with the Patriots, he was fantastic. In his first little go-around with the 49ers, he looked fantastic. But I'm not sure about this receiving core, and I'm not buying it enough to really make Jimmy G my day one starter. So he's going to get drafted. So if you want to grab him as a backup, you might have to do it a little earlier than you would want. But he's a pretty solid backup. He has some pretty good potential. I guess, Noah, how deep of a league would you have to be in for you to be rolling with Jimmy G as a starter? Like 15 teams, 20 teams?
I was thinking probably 16 teams.
Okay, so he's sort of on the cusp of being one of the top 12 starters, but he's not quite there yet. On to the running back portion of the 49ers. They've brought in Tevin Coleman, who had 167 carries last year for 800 yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground, caught 32 passes for 276 yards and 5 touchdowns with the Atlanta Falcons. And so he does have a little history with Kyle Shanahan. And then Jerick McKinnon is the other guy in that stable. 150 carries, 570 rush yards last season, and 3 touchdowns. He caught 51 balls for 421 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, Noah, does one of these 2 guys stand out to you? Or are, you love them both, or you hate them both, or how are you feeling?
It's really interesting that they did sign Tevin Coleman. It doesn't make a lot of sense given they just committed all that money to McKinnon a couple off seasons back. But I it's really tough because I think that Tevin Coleman can produce some maybe running back two value. I don't think they would have signed him unless their coach Kyle Shanahan was kind of beating the drum for him. But at the same time, I also like McKinnon as a backup, or just even somebody. He's going in the back of the 10th right now, and I do like him there because even if they're splitting 50-50, I think that McKinnon would produce more than that 10th round spot.
Yeah, McKinnon definitely has a little bit of an edge, I'd say, in the passing game. So that'll definitely help you out in PPR leagues. I've always been a big Tevin Coleman fan when he was in Atlanta. I really always thought, like, man, if he just got all the carries, that would be fantastic. And then he, leaves Atlanta and ends up going back into a running back timeshare. So I'm not sure I'm super convinced he's going to be getting all the or getting enough carries, I should say, for him to be like super fantasy relevant. But if Kyle Shanahan is playing favorites, I think Coleman's going to be the guy that he favors over McKinnon. But again, it's like a confusing situation, and these are the type that I'm generally staying away from. I don't think I'll have any of these guys on my team. Do you think there's value in both of them where they're being drafted right now, Noah? Or is it sort of you have to wait for them to fall down a draft board to really get any upside?
I think McKinnon has some value. And if Coleman fell, I think that he would have some value too.
Okay, so maybe just not where he's going right now.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. Well, those are those are not the receivers. Those are the running backs. We're on to the receivers, who have some interesting names there. Dante Pettis, who I've seen some hype for on Twitter already this year. 27 catches last year for 467 yards and 5 touchdowns. And like I said, somewhat of a Twitter superstar. Marquise Goodwin is also in the mix. 23 catches last year, 395 yards and 4 touchdowns. They brought in Deebo Samuel. It was a second-round pick from Ohio State, I believe. And former Eagles great Jordan
South Carolina, actually.
South Carolina?
Yeah.
Okay, Deebo Samuel from South Carolina. Well, thank you for fact-checking me.
Yep.
And Jordan Matthews, former Eagles great, had 20 catches for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. So nothing really to write home about. A lot of potential with these guys, but not a lot of production to this point. So, Noah, how are you feeling about them?
I think it's Dante Pettis is going in the 7th round, and everybody else is going like the 13th or 14th. And that makes no sense to me because even though Pettis came on strong at the end of the last year, I just think there are a lot of viable options, and I don't see a scenario where he kind of goes and sees way more targets than any of these guys. I think it'll be much more even than that. And I know that Garoppolo and Shanahan have been praising him this offseason, but I'm not really buying into that. And as for guys like Marquise Goodwin or Deebo Samuel, I like them both for the bench because I do think this is a pretty good offense. Garoppolo is a pretty good quarterback. So I think that obviously if Garoppolo is a good quarterback, they're going to be seeing production. And I think especially with Goodwin, he's one of the fastest guys in the league, so he could really blow up. I think he has the potential to be a starter.
Yeah, and Kyle Shanahan's always had that reputation for being like an offensive mastermind, so I'm sure he'll find ways to get all of these guys touches. So yeah, I like them all. I don't think I like Dante Pettis enough to take him in the 7th round, if that's where you said he was going. But Marquise Goodwin speed, always a fan of that. And Deebo Samuel, if a team's investing a 2nd-round pick, I think they'll probably try to get them in the mix, and I don't see him having a lot of competition where it's like, oh, we just can't fit him in or find him touches. So I do think he might be a good flyer late. But moving on, the reason most of those receivers don't have a ton of production is because the superstar on that offense last year was George Kittle, who had 88 catches for 1,377 yards and 5 touchdowns. And that 1,377 yards is the most all-time by a tight end, a record that was held for like an hour and a half by Travis Kelce last year until George Kittle broke it. So there's all types of tight end records being broken last year. So he is clearly an elite fantasy option, Noah. But we've talked about a few superstar tight ends to this point in our preview series. How does Kittle stack up against, some of the best guys like Ertz or Kelsey?
Kittle is certainly one of the best, and him and Zach Ertz are kind of neck and neck in terms of where they're going in drafts. I do like Ertz a little bit more just because I think he's slightly safer than Kittle would be, just because I think that Wentz would be a better is a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. But I mean, Kittle is awesome. We saw it last year. He has his athleticism is off the charts, something we really never see from tight ends. So you're certainly not going you're not going down a bad path if you take George Kittle.
Yeah, Kittle did really come out of nowhere, and it's funny. I feel like 2 years ago people were making jokes about guess who the 49ers tight end is, and then this year people are like, George Kittle's a top 3 tight end. He's amazing. I guess my one worry would be that he sort of did come out of nowhere last year, and I know he put up a huge numbers down the stretch last year, but I guess my only concern would be if teams are now going to key on him more than they were last year. But, I mean, it wasn't like last year they had a superstar receiver out there to draw coverage away from him. So I'm sure he'll produce regardless. I just am worried about, a little bit of a superstar slump. So I think I would take Kelsey or Ertz before him too. But that wraps up the 49ers. And we're going to ask Noah who he's going to pick to have on his team, because that's how we end every episode. So Noah, one of these 49er players must be on your team, and that player is
George Kittle. I just think that I know, I don't always just go with the best player, but I don't love any of these guys enough to not go with the best player on the team.
Yeah, not to knock any of the other guys on the 49ers because they do have potential, but George Kittle's stat lines, just looking at the numbers that I pulled doing research on this, they're just far and away better than anything else. He had more receiving yards than the 3 receivers they had on the team last year combined. So stuff like that. He's a fantasy stud, so you cannot go wrong taking Mr. George Kittle. So that wraps up the 49ers as we move on through the NFC, slowly but surely churning out these teams. So be sure to tune in next time when we go over the Arizona Cardinals, only NFC West team we have left. That should be fun. Kyler Murray talk, that should be interesting. So go be on the lookout for that. Go check out all our old episodes that we've already recorded on YouTube at Fantasy Six Pack. Go subscribe. Go hit us up on Twitter or leave us comments on the YouTube videos, just, so we know what we can do better or what you guys want to hear. Who should we talk about more? Stuff like that. But anyway, that's all I have. I'm Travis. He is Noah. Until next time, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
See ya.